Καλημέρα. Σας καλωσορίζουμε σε άλλη μια εκδήλωση του Athens Open Air Film Festival, το οποίο διοργανώθηκε το προηγούμενο καλοκαίρι από το Ελληνικό Κέντρο Κινηματογράφου και το Διεθνές Φεστιβάλ Κινηματογράφου της Αθήνας, σε δρόμους, σε πάρκα, σε πλατείες και σε θερινά σινεμά, δωρεάν για όλους, και το οποίο περιλαμβάνει και μερικά masterclass ή open discussions, ανοιχτές συζητήσεις με το κοινό. Σήμερα φιλοξενούμε τον Philippe Falardeau από τον Καναδά, την ταινία του οποίου παρουσιάσαμε χτες, τον εξαιρετικό κύριο Lazar. Θα μιλήσει στα αγγλικά. Νομίζω ότι για πιο μεγάλη ευκολία, αν δεν υπάρχουν κάποιοι που θέλουν ντε και καλά ελληνική διερμηνία, υπάρχουν. Όχι. So maybe we can speak in English. Καλημέρα. Παρ' όλα αυτά, μήπως ας είστε εδώ κοντά και... Okay.
Shall we sit?
Okay, sit. I'll be around.
You're not sitting?
You want me to sit? Okay.
Well, it'd be weird if you... Kalimera. So I hope I didn't understand correctly. I hope you didn't introduce this as a master class, because there is no master here, unless you are waiting for a master today.
No, in a way, you are kind
It's not me.
No.
I swear.
So...
So there will be an exam after this.
Do you want to start? It was amazing that you said yesterday that it was an interview. Εδώ καλύτερα. It was amazing yesterday. You said the journalist had interviewed. It was the 900th journalist.
Yeah, I was half joking, but yesterday I told the journalist that he was my 900th interview since last August 2011. And it's probably around that number, and it's difficult to renew yourself and still love the film after so many interviews. But what saves it is that it's often in a different country, in a different city, in a different culture, and the people see the film differently. I'll give you an example of that was very interesting for me. When I went to promote the film in Japan, there are, for some of you who saw the film, there is many issues in the film. There's education, there's death, there's also immigration. In Japan, they were not interested at all in the topic of immigration because they don't have a lot of immigration, and they have a different report to that. But they were really interested in the topic of grieving. And because they had this national tragedy 1 year ago with the tsunami and the radioactivity, they still were grieving as a people, and they saw in the film a metaphor for their national grieving. And all of a sudden, I became an expert on grieving, and they were asking me, what do you think we should tell our children about death? And I was trying to tell them I just did a story and tried to make the best possible story, but it made me realize that depending on where you are, people see the film differently, and so for me it helps me renew my own perspective on the film.
But who is that guy, Monsieur Lazar?
Who is he? I think he's... Every time I see, because I don't watch the film anymore, okay? I watch the first 2 minutes just to make sure the sound is right, and I watch the last 5 minutes to make sure you laugh at the right place. And I see often Monsieur Lazar as an angel, because when you think about it, he appears out of nowhere at the beginning of the film. You don't see him coming in the for my... is there someone here who didn't see the film? Raise your hand. Yeah, okay. So the short synopsis for the film is the story of an Algerian immigrant in Montreal. He's a refugee, and he lost his wife and his children and he will be a replacement teacher in an elementary school, a primary school, in a class where the children lost their teacher because she committed suicide. So it's the kind of movie you go on a Friday night to have fun to watch. And so in the film, he really appears out of nowhere in the principal's office. And at the end, the film cuts to black very abruptly, and in a way you say, was he real? Of course he is. But I wanted to portray him as someone who will, bring light into a dark place. But Monsieur Lazar is, I think, a prototype of many immigration experience. He could have been Lebanese. He could have been from any country which the person has to leave the country because of violence, because of political situation. And I wanted also to portray the dignity of the immigrant. Sometimes it's difficult to relate with immigrants because they seem to be a little closed, not wanting to tell about their own story. And what the film is saying is that sometimes it's because they have to cut from the past because the past is too painful. But this man keeps his dignity.
But do you know people like Monsieur Lazar in Canada?
Yes, we have a lot of people like Monsieur Lazar in Canada that came in the 70s from Vietnam, others that came from...
Even from Greece, I suppose, in the 70s.
In the 70s, yes, but they went to Toronto. We have a Greek community in Montreal, but for some odd reason, we can't find frappé in Montreal, and I have to change that. When I go to a Greek restaurant in Montreal and I ask for frappé, they say, we don't have that, we'll just make it. So I have to import Nescafé frappé from here. But we had a lot of immigration from Northern Africa, from Somalia in the 1980s, 90s, and from Northern Africa in the middle of the 90s. So we are learning to deal with this new immigration. Now we talk about immigration as a social phenomenon and as a social and political problem, but I didn't want in the film to tackle this issue as a political problem. I wanted to address it as meeting the other. Who is the other? In the perspective of the child, in the perspective of the immigrant. And this is something that fascinates me since the beginning of the 90s because I studied political science and international relations. I never studied cinema. But I went on this trip around the world in 1992. It was a program on national television called The Race Around the World, in French, La Course Autour du Monde. And every year they chose 8 young amateur contestants who had to travel alone with SVHS camera. Those were the old-time camera without even time code. There were no digital camera. And they had to do 20 short films in 26 weeks in 20 different countries. So I was watching that on television and saying, well, that seems interesting. So I applied not to participate, but just to dream about going around the world, just like when you buy a lottery ticket. You don't buy a lottery ticket to become a millionaire. You just buy it to think about what you would do with all that kind of money that you know you're not going to win. So I applied for the same reason, but for some reason they chose me, and so I had to go on this half-year trip and make 20 short movies. So I would arrive in a country. The first one was Guatemala. Find a subject, shoot it for 2 days, convince the people to help me, lock myself in a hotel room, do the editing plan on paper, because there were no editing on computer at that time. Yes, I am that old. And you would rush to the airport, put the film and the editing plan and your voiceover in the FedEx envelope, send it back to Montreal, and leave to the next country. And the films were edited in Montreal and showed with 3 or 4 weeks delay on television before a panel of judges who would rate the film, give you marks. And by that time, you would be in Peru, Salvador, and I went on to like Syria, Turkey, Egypt, Libya, all these countries that have revolutions now.
Not Greece?
Yes, I did a movie in that race in Thessaloniki. I went to Skopje and Thessaloniki because there was this argument about the Republic of Skopje. You guys call it the Republic of Skopje, but in Macedonia, they call it Macedonia, and because of the word, you know the story. And so I did something about that, a little funny. And so when I came back from that trip, I knew that I wanted to tell story with images. So that was my film school, and that changed my life. I began making documentary, which I think is the highest form of filmmaking. This says here, j'aime le documentaire, which means I love documentary. But it's, I thought it was too difficult, so I moved to a much easier filmmaking genre, which is fiction. I think fiction is much easier to make than
Why
documentary.
you say that?
Because documentary, first of all, you don't control the material. You don't have a script, and the characters that you are filming, they can call you at night at home. And when I write a fiction, my characters, they don't call me. They just stay in the computer. And you have a moral contract when you do a documentary. You have a moral contract with the person, the people you are filming. But you have also an obligation to do the best film possible. So you are stuck with trying to tell a story, possibly a dramatic one, but with real people. And you have to take into account the relationship you had with these people while still making maybe a film that will not hurt them, but will sometimes be difficult for them to watch, because there is an irony with documentary, is that if something bad happens to your character, ironically, the film becomes more interesting because there is more drama. And any kind of storytelling, if there's drama, it's more interesting. So I couldn't cope with that. And also because of that trip around the world I made, I always had a feeling that I was stealing something to, you know, you go to Salvador, you go to the territory that were at that time controlled by the rebel. You go in for 2-3 days, you film a part of their life story, and then you leave with a part of their story. And you have to tell the best story possible while respecting them. And I felt that I was the one who got the better part of all of that. And it was difficult for me every time to leave. And when you make a documentary like that, you have the same feeling. So that's why I moved to fiction. I think it's easier mentally for me, at least, to make fiction.
Yeah, but I mean,
and you travel more after when you make a film. You know, they don't invite the documentary filmmaker as often as, I don't know why. That.
Will you please tell us that story about writing your scriptwriter, your script in IANOS?
Yes. For some reason, I keep coming back to Greece, and in my third feature called "It's Not Me, I Swear," it's with a child actor. It's the story of it takes place in 1968 in Quebec, in Canada, and the mother leaves the children and the father, and she leaves to Greece. She wants to start over again, and she leaves to Greece. And it's based actually on a true story of someone I know. He saw his mother when he was a young kid leave to Greece. And so I had to shoot some of the scenes here, and I chose an island where there was a few. I went scouting, and on IANOS I found all the places I needed for the film. So we went there. It was mid-October of 2006, I think. And I became friend with the hotel owner, who couldn't believe that I brought I rented 10 rooms in October. He was so happy. So I went back there the next summer to write this script, the first draft of this script. So like I said yesterday, there was a lot of frappe that went into this script. And since then, I've been coming back to Greece just for vacation or to write. I find it very inspirational. Especially then on EOS, they have a place called Homer's Tomb, because according to Herodotus, Homer died on Eos, which I'm pretty sure he didn't, but still, it's inspiring.
You don't want a frappe?
No, I had one. It's.
Δάφνη, θες να δώσεις το μικρόφωνο είναι εκεί.
Thank you. Right. Congratulations. Your film was fantastic last night. As you said, you deal with sensitive, potentially controversial subjects. This particular film deals with death, suicide, a particularly tragic form of death, migration, the other, which Canada has dealt with for decades, and now here in Greece we are tackling. It happens to be my specialty as well. As a filmmaker, what are the concerns you have when you're dealing with potentially controversial topics like this? Do you worry about, is it too much? Is it too little? What's the balance? And have there been any surprises in the reactions to these controversial subjects, either by the public, the industry, whatever? Thank you.
The problem is not so much to have a controversial topic, because I think in film or in art in general, I think there shouldn't be any taboo. The problem in filmmaking, and there are no master here today, and I don't want to do a master class, but the advice is always try to just limit yourself to one subject in one film. The film storytelling doesn't tolerate many issues or subject in one film. And in this particular film, either I didn't read the manual, the instruction manual, because I totally ignored that, and there are so many issues in the film that on paper this film shouldn't work. And I think it does because it takes place in a universal setting that is the classroom, and we've all been to class. Yes? We all know this place very intimately, and no matter what age we are right now, we have recollection of that place, and we know that class is like a social laboratory. It's like a mirror of what's happening out there in real life. So the audience takes for granted that there is many issues that takes place in the class, from friendship to bureaucracy to dealing with, well, meeting the other because there are children of immigrants there. Dramatic things can happen. A funny thing can happen. So I think the classroom makes it possible for me to address many topics. But normally in a film, I think we have to restrain ourselves or make the topic part of the canvas, of the background story, and not necessarily the story. The main character is an immigrant, but the film, I don't think, is about immigration. It enriched the character, and it allows me to revisit who we are as a society in Quebec through the eyes of an immigrant. So that's what makes it interesting, but I don't think it is about immigration. One thing I avoided was to have at the end of the story the immigration tell him, no, you cannot stay in Canada. In the play, it was like that. And I tried it while I edited the film, because I had shot both possibilities, and all of a sudden the film became about immigration and about the immigration process, and I didn't want that. I wanted the film to be about the relationship of the teacher and the children through grieving. So I decided that he would stay in Canada. Maybe the only controversial topic in the film is about, should we be allowed to touch children or not at school? Now in North America, it's total paranoia, and you can't just go like this. Of course, some teachers do. And I know why we came to this place, is that we wanted to avoid, the things like that, or the grabbing of the arms of, I used to be grabbed by the jaw a lot by teachers, and we wanted to stop that, and that's okay. And there's always the paranoia of pedophilia. It's there. My position is that no matter how many rules, regulation, and protocol we have, bad things will happen in the world. It will happen. Now, should we stop any kind of real human relationship between adults and children because sometimes bad things will happen? I say no, and I wanted the film to start some kind of debate around that in Quebec, but it didn't. Ironically, most of the teachers agreed with what the film was saying. And I think we have to understand that children need the affection of adults, and adults need the affection of children. And as a man, I don't have children yet, and as a man, it's obvious that I cannot touch children. My nephews, maybe, I can, but other people's children, it's a no-no. It's definitely a no-no, and that's ironic. And in the school situation, I think we've just gone too far. So that might be the only controversial subject, I think, in the film.
It didn't become controversial.
It wasn't taken up, no. People just agreed, but nothing will change.
Κάποιος άλλος έχει ζητήσει από εκεί, νομίζω. Okay. I suppose that, have you seen the other two quite... Okay.
Hi. I just want to ask whether when you were making the film or when you thought of the film, if you had any expectations about going so far with it to the Oscars, for example, and how was that like an experience?
First of all, you finish the film, you look at the film, you want to go to sleep for 6 months. You think, okay, there's a film that takes place in a class, talks about suicide, there's no stars, it's in French, it's going to last 2 weeks. That's what I thought. And so there's no way I thought it would go to the Oscars, and there's no connecting dot between that kind of film and Hollywood, so it's not even an issue. And then Canada chooses the film in September to represent the country, and then there's 82 other countries that chooses the film, so you have a chance out of 5 chance out of 80. My father, who used to be a statistician, said, well, that's 1 chance out of 12. I said, no, yeah, that's not bad. And then it's a long process until January, and then it's very nerve-wracking because you start thinking, yeah, I want this, and this is bad actually. Because it's not why you make films, but because you read in Variety and Hollywood Reporter that, oh, watch this film, it's going to go far, you start thinking, yeah, I want to go to the Oscars, and I think it's a bad thing. You don't want to admit to yourself that you want to go to the Oscars because you always say, like anyone, yeah, well, Hollywood doesn't do really good movies anyway. And so the day that you're chosen, first of all, 1 week before they choose 9 films out of 80, and then the next week 5 films. They just want to torture you like this. And every time something pops up, you get all the media calling you, and they want a reaction. There's no news yet because you're still not at the Oscar, but they want a reaction. So what you're going to say to journalists? You have to say the same thing. Yes, well, we're... No. So the day we were chosen, I was at the Sundance Film Festival, and the day before I had a stomach ache, and you wake up very early in the morning because the press conference in Los Angeles is at 5 o'clock, in Sundance at 6 o'clock. You wake up and you go on the computer, and then the nomination comes, and I just heard the name Canada, and I started shouting, and I jumped in the arms of my producer, and I saw the sofa, and I wanted to go to the sofa and sleep for 6 months because I was so drained of this waiting. And then the telephone started ringing, and on that day I did 44 interviews. And the only thing I could say is that it's a dream come true, but it's a dream I never had. And that's the only way I can describe, being chosen for the Oscars. After that, it becomes a huge roller coaster ride, and no matter what happens, you know that the film is a winner. And the fact that I'm standing here talking to you and that Strada is going to release the film here in Greece has to do probably with the fact that it was nominated at the Oscars. So the film travels. He says no, but I don't totally agree with him because it's like kind of a seal of approval that, you know, but the door, some doors are opening now. People say, doors must open now for you. And I say, yeah, but what is the building? And the door is open, you look at the building, do I want to get into that building? Do I want to make a studio movie in Hollywood? No. Unless it's a James Bond. So I've been offered some scripts.
From Hollywood?
From Hollywood. And sometimes with actors attached. One of them was with Jessica Chastain and
wow.
And Colin Farrell. So they send me the script and I say, okay, Philippe, you're going to like that script. You're going to love that script. I start reading and I said, oh, no, it's not for me. And you say, it might do a good movie, but I can't make that film because I don't have a personal insight into that subject. So you have to learn to say no. So right now I'm still writing my own stuff. And maybe one day. It's not, so the question is it easier to find producers? It's easier for a producer to find me, but it's not easier to find producers because finding a producer is like finding a girlfriend. It's a match. It's someone you have to work close with. So I've had people calling me, but I'm not necessarily interested with what they have to offer me. And sometimes it's very funny because they see the film and, we like your sensibility, we like your film, we have this for you, and you read the script and you say, what is this? How can they, you know, make a thing that I would be interested in that? Because it's a weird action movie and so it's a match, and the match is difficult. Finding money, it's always difficult. It's always difficult because the people who have the money, they will want to know what's the story, who is going to play in it. Unfortunately, I have to say that in Canada, we have a very generous system. It's 85% of the films are funded by government money, either federal Canadian money, or in my province, we have also a provincial government because in the province of Quebec, as some of you may know, we speak French, so we have a little different culture, so we have our own money also for cinema. So we do get the money from the government, but still, there are like every year 100 projects and only a few are made. So we still have to submit the script and apply for government grants, so it's still difficult.
Yes, in Canada it's a very interesting system. I remember in this very bookshop, the general governor of Canada, she was here and she explained all that it's a very generous system.
If you compare to Greece, or if you compare to a lot of countries in the world, you have to understand that apart from the United States and maybe some Bollywood movies in India, very few films are financed without some help from government or subsidies. And in Canada, I think we have one of the most generous systems in the world. But still, it's every year there's so many new directors, so many film schools, so many projects that the pie is still the same size, and the people who are wanting a piece of the pie are doubling every 3 years. So it is a problem. But what I say to young people that start in cinema is that don't wait for a grant to make your first film. We all have the tools now to make a short film with camera and editing at home and friends. You have to make your first film on your own. Don't wait for money. And then when you have a first film, you can be invited to festivals and you can have that to show to people. And well, that, and also make sure that you have something to say in your film. Because I think that today it's not only a question of of craftsmanship or being able to make beautiful shots or know how to make a film. A lot of people know how to drive a camera. I say drive a camera like if it's a car, but sometimes it is. And you have to be singular. What I look for in a filmmaker is not if he's good at placing a camera and making all these interesting shots. Is I ask myself, is that a singular point of view on life? Could some other director have done the same film? If yes, it's not that singular. I prefer a movie with a lot of flaws but is totally original than a movie that's well done but that could have been done by many other directors.
So the digital technology make them filmmaking easier, or
well,
not?
In
which sense you make it easier, in which sense you make it more difficult?
It makes it easier because you don't need like thousands and thousands of dollars to make a film now. If you have some friends, you can make a short film of 5-10 minutes that's not going to cost that much money, at least the first film. If you want to make a living out of it, I think you do need money, and if you have some ambition, you do need money to have a real crew, real actors. But the first, the downfall is that because it's so accessible, you think let's shoot now. I want to shoot now, and because it's possible to I could take my phone here and make a film.
Yeah.
Now, do I have a script? No. I'll figure out in the editing room what the story is. If you're a genius, that might work. If you're lucky, that might work. Most of the time, if you don't have a good script, it will not work. So I think the downfall of the technology is that we don't take the time to really reflect upon what we want to say and how we want to say it. And I still think that you can make a bad film with a good script. It's very rare that you can make a good film with a bad script. So you really need a good script.
Hello. You gave us a little bit of advice for new filmmakers. What kind of advice would you give? I know you're very young, of course, but what kind of advice would you give to young people who are actors and they're just starting their career in the cinema? What are the things that they should be careful about? What are the traps that they might fall in? What is important? What is something that you must not pay attention to? Any kind of advice.
It's a very large question. I'll start at the very, very beginning with like casting kids. I had to do a lot of casting for my film. And then when you're casting a kid, when you're auditioning kids, you're really auditioning the parents. Because it's the parents who wants them sometime to become a movie star. Wrong reason to be in the cinema business. To become a star or to become famous. Or now there's technology for that, and you have Facebook, you have Twitter. You can, if someone wants to become a star, there's many ways to become a star, but it's certainly not a good reason to make films. I don't think so. So it starts from there, finding your own personal reason. Why there's a lot of way we can express ourselves today. A blog, a book, a painting, singing, poetry, politics, cinema. So why that particular medium instead of another one? That's the first question people should ask themselves. Secondly, when I go see young, I'm not that young, by the way. I look young maybe, but I'm... And when I go see people at university or film schools, first thing I ask, how many people here want to direct a movie? So, most of the people go like this. And then I ask the second question is, how many people think that you're going to make a living making movies? And then they look around and they start thinking, and I don't want to discourage them, but I just want them to ask themselves the right questions. And cinema, there's so many beautiful craftsmanship around cinema that is not necessarily film directing. Acting, of course, sound design, sound engineering, it is so creative. It can make or break a movie. Script writing, of course, set direction, art direction. There's so many things you can do around cinema. It doesn't have to always have to do with film directing. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, like I said before, trying to figure out, I think cinema is an art of point of view. You are looking at things, and you are focusing inside a frame, and you are limiting life to what you put in the frame, and that forces yourself to think, what am I saying here? What am I looking at? And I'm asking the people who want to make films, what is your view on life? And you have to be a good storyteller, but you have to have something to say about life, about politics, about friendship, about anything you want, because there is no bad subject. But ask yourself, is it singular? Is it interesting? And I ask myself 3 questions every time I have a subject. Do I want to live with that for 4 years? 2 years writing, 1 year making, and 1 year going around the world talking about it? Is it important to talk about that? And will it interest other people than me? So sometimes I cannot answer yes to the 3 questions, and I move on to the other subject.
I wanted to ask you if a couple of things. I'll try to be brief. Do you, both Canada and Greece, have very important film traditions? But more recently, especially in Quebec and in Greece, there's kind of a, maybe renaissance is too big a word, but a recrudescence of young, very interesting, very vital filmmaking. So I don't know how familiar you are with that crop of Greek films and your contemporaries here with Quebec films, but I think it would be a very interesting dialogue, a very interesting, perhaps a co-production in mind. So if you could just address that situation, you know, kind of small countries that are working around their sense of identity in different ways. And the other related question, not directly, but related, is I agree with you. I've seen your film a couple of times, and that the whole question of child molesting and touching is controversial in North America. But I think in your film, you really did have, you just said, important films are about also having a strong point of view. You do have a very strong point of view about the kind of society that you suggest, especially about immigrants and law. I mean, it's not about immigrants, I agree with you, but you definitely do work that, you know, that's an important part of your film. I think it is about how we learn to live with each other's pain, the recognition of the other. So I'll stop here. Certainly I don't want to tell you what your film is about, but
no, but it's when the film is done, it's about what you would think it's about. What I think about my film now is maybe a little irrelevant, but while doing this race around the world I told you about, I was always on borders of countries. Incredible things happen on the border of countries. That's where the real stuff happens. And for me, when I came back, because I was the immigrant when I was traveling, I was the one not fitting, trying to understand the culture, and so when I came back to Canada, I always was fascinated with immigrant, and every time I met someone that was not from Quebec or Canada, where do you come from? Why did you come here? I'm really interested in that, meeting and to know what they think about us also. About your first question, and my point of view about like touching the children, I think is made clear at the end of the movie. The young girl goes back in the classroom and she wants a hug from the teacher. So not only emotionally she needs it, but I think it's an act of political resistance that she does at the end, and that's why I end my movie like that. As for the filmmaking, I think every 10 or 12 years in many countries we say, there's the Renaissance generation. It's like that back home also. It's a renewal. It's the new generation of filmmakers. So it's just normal. It's not something. It's something that happens every, I would say, 12 to 15 years in every country that have filmmakers. So in that sense, yes. And yes, I'm a little aware of what's happening here in Greece. And I think that perhaps in Greece it's even stronger, in my point of view, because there is some social and political turmoil that is feeding the creation of young artists. Back home in Canada, the problem with our country is that it's probably going too well. You know, we have not been affected by the world economic crisis like other countries in the past 3 or 4 years. Canada has survived that quite well, actually. And it's not a violent country. It's not we have social turmoil in Quebec because of the question of separation, but we're really sleeping on that one, so it's not happening. So there's no social canvas that like pushes the artist to say something or to create things that so we look outside our country for that. And if you look at some films like Incendie, or Monsieur Lazar, who uses an Algerian immigrant, we look from outside. And I think Greek cinema can look inside its own society to create powerful stuff. I might be wrong there because I know very few films, but I hear about it. You know, one film I liked very much 2 years ago was Attenberg. I thought it was original. I thought it was funny at times, and it is definitely singular to Greece. It is definitely talking in a way about the situation in Greece. So if we have to look outside our country to find strong subjects, and it's perhaps because Canada, it's going too well. Although we could debate that because now I think we are taking a turn back home that is more conservative, more aligned with the United States, more military. Canada used to be a country where we went abroad just for peacekeeper, the blue helmet, les casques bleus, and now we are participating in war efforts. This is a different philosophy I don't agree with, but it's a turn that Canada has taken. The federal government has been cutting back on many things that has to do with culture. So I'm afraid of the direction we're taking right now, and that might have an effect on the way we create films, books, or anything else.
Thanks. A question about the technicalities. If I'm not mistaken, at the very beginning, when the little boy witnesses the suicide and then runs off down the corridor to seek help, I think you were using a handheld camera?
I'm using a handheld camera 80% of the time in the film.
Can you discuss the difference between handheld and
well, the handheld
tripod?
camera for me, you can use it as like Lars von Trier style, where the camera is always, you know, turning and switching and panning, which gives you you need a pill just to watch the movie, not to get seasick, or just handheld camera but very sober. And I like it because even if you don't really realize it's handheld, it's like someone watching. It's just a slight natural movement of the body, of the breathing of the cameraman, and it's like you're there as a witness in the school, in the corridor. And that first shot, it's a long shot. It takes 2.5 minutes. It's one shot without editing. He comes in, he sees the hanging, he leaves, and then the camera is left in the corridor without anyone in the frame for about 20 seconds, which in cinema is a very long time. And you hear the other children coming in, but you don't see them. And so I used what I wanted to do, first of all, is discover the body through the point of view of the kid. So we're in his back, over his shoulder, looking in the same direction we are with him. It's as if we were just behind his back watching with him. And after that we are left alone in the corridor of the school. And the corridor of a school is like the intestine, it's like the stomach of a school. It's where the illness comes in, the virus of death comes in. And I wanted to treat the school as a character, so you are left alone in this belly, and you know that death has entered the school, and the children, which represents life, of course, also enters this place. So that's why I wanted a one long shot. So we did 19 takes. The scene you see in the film is the 19th one. What was funny is that even if it's winter in the story, it was summer, it was July, it was 35 degrees outside, and the kids had to wear coats, boots, wool shirt. They were sweating. It was so hot. So between takes, we had an army of people that had to take away the sweat on the forehead of the kids because they were so bright, you know, they were sweating, and they hated me that day. So we shot that during the summer. Everything we shot inside was made in the summer, and we had to wait 6 months to do the exterior scenes. But I like the handheld camera, and I like the handheld camera, and sometimes for some scenes now I use the tripod and I fix the camera, and it gives us some breathing space. It like relaxes the spectator because everything settles down, and then you come back to the handheld camera. It's like punctuation in a sentence.
Thank you. No more questions?
Gus Van Sant, what? You want his phone number? The cousin of Gus Van Sant, I'm not sure about that. Really not sure about that. But why do you say that? Oh, yes. But I learned my craft doing this trip around the world with a small camera. And I didn't even know how to use my tripod. It was too complicated. So my camera was always in my hand. So that's how I learned to film people and to get close to people. And I think that's why I keep using the handheld camera. And I will keep using it. But this is technical stuff.
Hi, welcome to our country first.
Ευχαριστώ.
In your opinion, which are the basic elements of a good film director? It's tough, right?
Okay. You have to be interested in more than one thing in life, and you have to be curious, and you have to like people and like working with people, because you are nothing without people when you make a film. Often filmmakers think there are God on the set, but I always say they have the most authority, but they have no power, because they rely on everybody. You don't hold the camera, you don't play in front of the camera, you don't set the light, you don't do nothing. Actually, you're the person who does nothing. I mean, concretely nothing. Of course, everything is in your head, and you have to convey that. So you have to have a tremendous respect for the people you are working with. And I know that some directors are getting away with murder because they're shouting at people and they're using all kinds of tactics. And I think it's the bad way to make a film. Unless you're a genius, you won't be able to make good films, or it won't be pleasant. I'm not going to make films if it's not fun making it. So the process has to be fun for you, for the others. So a good director is someone who has to set a playful atmosphere on the set. It's also someone who can use words to convey what he has in his mind, because he's the only person, or she is the only person, who has the end product in his mind. And I think you have to be able to communicate that to all your also, a good director is someone who will gratefully accept ideas of others. I remember my first film, a lot of people came to me. We were a very small crew, and they said, you should maybe do things like that. And I immediately said no, because I didn't want them to think that I was losing control of the film, that I was taking their ideas because I didn't have ideas. This is so stupid. You are the one who is eventually making the decision anyway. So if someone has a better idea than you, take it. Thank him or her for it, but take it. Because you have to think about the film and not about your ego. And nowadays, I have no problem using other people's ideas because it comes out of conversation. You have to be able to make decisions quickly. And for me, I was telling that to someone yesterday, the important thing is not to make the right decision. The important thing is to make a decision and live with it. And never say, yeah, I wanted to do this, but the director of photography, you know, he wanted to do it that way, so it's no. Even if it's someone else's idea or someone else's mistake, it is your mistake. You have to be responsible for that until the end. If an actor is not good, it's your mistake. It's not the actor's mistake, because either you didn't direct him or her well, or you chose the person and you shouldn't have. So for me, it's about taking responsibility. The good part is that when the film has success, you travel around the world, and you're the one who's you know, but, and if the film doesn't succeed well, you have to take it on your own shoulders. You take responsibility. It's so easy for me to say while in Greece and... You know.
One more last question, shall we? Okay.
Hello. Did you shoot the film digitally? It was in digital camera?
Yes. My first film in 1999 was the first film in Quebec that was shot digitally and transferred to film. And it was a mockumentary. It was the story of a guy filming his friend, so it made sense to use a small digital camera. The film was called The Left Side of the Fridge. And this one, then I used film for my second and third, but now it's going away. It's a lost battle. I prefer film. I prefer the look of film. But we lost that battle. It's going away. We can still use film, but it's more expensive. So I shot digitally with the red camera, but there was a good reason for me to use the red camera because I was working with children, and I thought we're going to make a lot of takes because it's children, so it's going to cost less. And ironically, the children were right on after 2 or 3 times. It was the adult actors that I had to do 8, 10 takes. But the children were really right on. So I used the red camera. And we had some prints for some cinemas, but most of the time now it's DCP.
And what about the takes? I mean, is it tricky sometimes when you have the time and the money to do a lot of takes, but maybe...
It's something I negotiate with my producer. I prefer to have a lot of times to get the acting right. I think we can make mistakes lighting the film, framing the film, editing the film. We can make mistakes, but there's one mistake you cannot make. It's the play of the actors. If it's not good, you cannot correct that. So I try never to shoot more than 3 pages of script a day. Sometimes you have to do more because of the schedule. But for me, 3.5 pages a day, so I can do as many takes as that I want.
And do you rehearse a lot with your actors?
Do I what?
Do you rehearsals before the shooting?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Rehearse. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I rehearse a lot with kids. With the actors, no, just we sit down around the table, we read the scenes, and I just make sure that the tone is right. But after that, it's not like rehearsing for a theater play where you can sculpt what you want very precisely, because once you're on the set, they have different clothes, they have different shoes, they have props they're going to work with. The environment will affect their play. Once we're on the set, we know for sure that they're going to go that way, take that object, you know, look through the window. In a rehearsal room, it becomes theater. And also, I do not want to burn the emotion beforehand, so I rehearse a little but not a lot. What I would like to do someday is just shoot 1 scene per day. Like the Dardenne brother, what they do, they have 70 days of shooting. Like I had 27 for this one. What they do is they come on the set in the morning and they rehearse the scene and the movement of the people, and for like 4 hours. They just do it and do it and do it. And then they leave the technician to prepare the set, and then the afternoon they shoot it a lot of time, and then they reshoot it just for sound at different speed. So it's an incredible thing, because after that they can use in the editing room the same scene, but they have a different rhythm. So they can see in the film, oh, now we should use the faster rhythm for that scene or the slower rhythm for that scene. But that means that you need 70 days of shooting, and that's a lot of money. Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Likewise.
Can I ask you to give me your contact details? Is that all right?
Yes.